So if I can say anything to anyone who might listen to this, just know that you are loved and that your life has great meaning and tremendous value. And as difficult and dark as things may be, there is always light somewhere. Just hang on and survive and get through it. And, you will find joy again, and you will find happiness again. And people care.
This is Intentionally Ever After. Join intentional lifestyle coach Joe Bukartek for a series of personal conversations and coaching sessions with various people about how living with intention shows up for them.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Intentionally Ever After. Today, I am thrilled to be chatting with the fabulous, the one, the only, Dr. Ann Groves Lloyd. Ann, welcome.
Woo-hoo! Thank you, Joe. Good to see you. I love how you get into your podcast voice.
This is my podcast radio voice, yes.
Yes, that is very nice. It's very rich and buttery and deep.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ann, would you kindly introduce yourself to folks?
Certainly. As Joe said, my name is Ann Groves Lloyd. I'll do a evolutionary introduction. Born in a very rural area of Wisconsin, where I still live, Lodi, Wisconsin. It's about 25 miles northwest of Madison. Grew up on our family farm, was the fifth generation raised there. My family settled here in the 1860s. It's a small town, 3,000 people. And when I grew up, it was about 1,800 and very white, very farm-oriented community. When people talk about parents, I hit the parent jackpot. I won the lottery. I had two amazing parents. My mother was a middle school teacher, English teacher, and my father was a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And growing up in a very homogenous community, I guess is the term, I was blessed. My parents loved to travel and schlepped us everywhere. I think by the time I was 11, I'd been in most states in the continental U.S. And my dad, through his work at the university, he was the director of the University Center for Cooperatives. So his life was dedicated to cooperative education. So teaching people how to create co-ops to take control of some aspect of their lives. So co-ops for, rural co-ops, farm co-ops, milk co-ops, electric co-ops, but even things like Group Health Cooperative in Madison, Wisconsin. My mother was one of the founding board members of that entity. And he worked with a lot of international students. So I was growing up in this very white community, but I was exposed to people from all around the world from a very early age. And when my parents would schlep us anywhere, they made sure one of the first things we did was go to Chinatown and other ethnically different portions of cities and communities. And anyway, so then I swore when I graduated from high school, I'd leave this dusty little town and get out of here. And I went to UW-Madison and lasted a year there and moved home, took a semester off school to figure out what I wanted to do. And I'll fast forward from there. I wound up working at UW-Madison for 30 years and got my master's and doctorate there, had a very blessed career. And now I retired from there in 2018 when I ran for the assembly here in the state of Wisconsin, in probably the most gerrymandered district in our state, and could not win and did not win. I ran in a special election in June of 18 and then the regular election that November. And then I was retired for like a year and a half. The only thing I was doing was I was on the Common Council as an alder here in Lodi. And after doing that for 5 years, I decided I wanted to try being a mayor here. And the incumbent was running again. And he was a very, very good man. And I learned a lot from Jim, but I just felt I brought a different skill set. And I was lucky enough to get elected about 3 weeks after the pandemic locked everything down. So about the time everybody else was being sequestered in their house, I started going to work down to City Hall. And so I'm in the process of collecting signatures to get on the ballot for the voters will give me another 2-year term. I would be incredibly honored. And that's kind of me right now. Life is good. President of the Lodi Optimist Club. Not sure how that happened, but just keeping as busy, probably way more busy than I want to be right now. But the life is really, really good. Oh, and I turned 60 this year. So if y'all are wondering how old I am, I'm frickin' 60. I turned 60. Holy crap.
Is that part of your identity, Ann, your age, or how does that make you feel being 60?
I feel blessed. I feel incredibly blessed. I feel empowered. I feel excited about being 60. There's a lot of wisdom that comes with, well, there's probably a lot more that I haven't tapped into, but there's a lot of wisdom that comes with being this age. But there's also a lot of freedom because I don't have to give a shit about stuff that I gave a shit about for way too many years. And that doesn't just come with age. I'm sure we'll get into some of these other experiences that have shaped my philosophy around my life and my existence. But I just feel, incredibly blessed. And I'm very well aware that my mom died at the age of 71. And we never know how much time we have left on this planet. And certainly being 60 has kicked me into thinking about what my legacy will be and what I want to leave behind and what I hope my mark will be in this community.
Would you mind sharing maybe a little bit of that idea of legacy and what you hope to leave behind?
Sure. So part of my journey on this earth, of course, I think all of us are well aware of the lessons that we need to learn. And I listened to your podcast with our dear friend, Jim Grettinger, and Jim talked about the notion of, I think he called it kind of survival living. And for me, many years, I was focused on money. I was focused on earning more than my brothers. I was focused on the next career step, being a director of career services. And then I wanted to be an associate dean. And then health issues came into play. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and I had to step down as associate dean. And suddenly everything that I had focused on was kind of gone. I didn't want to move up the career ladder. I couldn't. Stress is one of the worst things for fibromyalgic people. And so I started really focusing on what was important and what really mattered to me as a person who's really drawn to service, I should say. So the reason I brought up the money thing is money is sort of a two-edged sword for me. I'm terrible with money. My husband could tell you horror stories about me and money because to me, money is just a mechanism of, in many cases, doing things for others. We are blessed to have, enough. We are very blessed to have enough to live a decent lifestyle. I could have worked longer. We could have banked more money. There are lots of we could haves, but money just has never been that important to me. My legacy isn't about what my bank account says the day I die. It's about how I've treated others, how I've made a difference, how I hopefully left this little valley a little better than when I was born into it, how I've set it up for success for future generations, how I've engaged and valued people. That's the legacy. I hope when I die, people think of my laughter. I hope they think of my kindness and compassion and generosity. And to me, that's my legacy. And that's what's important. And of course, family, taking care of family, but just doing the absolute best we can with those people we're blessed to encounter along the way.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering if this question that I'm about to ask has the same answer or if there's a difference. What does it mean to live intentionally?
Yeah, I love that question. To me, it means knowing your core values and living an authentic life that is true to those values. I loved my graduate work, and one of the best courses I took was a course I thought it was going to be all about working with teacher unions. It was called Human Resources or Supervision in Higher Education, which sounded like such a snooze, and it was taught during the summer. So I knew it would be filled primarily with K-12 folks who were on break. And of course, I was focused on the higher ed track. But the wonderful professor, Chris Bruner, to this day, I remember her with such gratitude. Chris, our textbook for the course was Gloria Steinem's A Revolution Within. And we spent time reflecting on who we are and writing our core values statement, and then looking at how those core values are reflected in our leadership and supervisory styles. And having the space, I tell people this so often, my graduate coursework was so vital to who I am today between my graduate work and my boss at the Alumni Association, Gail Langer, who just passed in September. those two things really shaped my philosophy about life and who I am and how I lead and how I hope people see me in the world. So those core values, I just relied on every day. I still, to this day, having the knowledge, the space to write what's important to me, and then to actually be able to refer back to that and think about, is what I'm doing or what I'm thinking about doing part of that core value. So for me, authenticity, I guess one of my greatest pet peeves is hypocrisy. I try to walk the walk and talk the talk. To me, that notion of people seeing what's important to me reflected in the way I motor myself through the world. I'm constantly trying to become a better person, constantly trying to work on the things that I need to work on. I think we're planted on this earth with some lessons to learn along the way. And I think I'm still here because I haven't learned all those lessons. So being authentic, living intentionally for me is this call to service. I know my life is all about service to others. And at times, I think for my partner, it can become a little frustrating because he and I are probably the last things I think about. It's better now that we're retired and you can have the space to have the time for us. But when in your interview with Jim Grattinger, he talked about that survival mode. I lived that way for literally decades, just constantly thinking, I can get through this. It'll be better at the end of the semester. It'll be better in the summer. It'll be better when I finish my master's. It'll be better when I'm associate dean. And never, ever stopping and thinking how blessed I was and missing so much. I commuted for 2 decades and rarely noticed the change of seasons or the sunsets or the sunrises. And so living intentionally for me is also a lot about being present and enjoying this moment. Yeah, I still am looking forward to going to Florida in a couple of weeks. That's really great. Life will be good in Florida around a pool. But, there are so many miracles in every day that I just missed. And so living intentionally for me also is about taking the time to notice the change of seasons, to take the time to spend time with my friends and enjoy them. I'm blessed to still live in the place I grew up. I mean, a lot of my friends I've known since either birth or kindergarten anyway. So living intentionally is just, for me, that intentionality of every day. I may intentionally goof off for a day and that's okay. Today is probably going to be one of these days. So it's having that purpose and that focus and knowing that my life is really dedicated to just improving the life of others. That's what it is for me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that as it's kind of gone throughout the years too, because even in those decades of survival mode, you were being motivated by your call to service. So it's not like you were blindly going into it necessarily, right? You had that motivation there that was fueled by one of your core values, right?
That's true. Yeah, certainly. Once I landed at the university, I found my purpose. Jim talked about, sort of coming into knowing that through the pandemic. I think landing at UW-Madison, getting connected with student affairs and student academic affairs was where I really found my joy. I learned that there's nobody more creative or hardworking than college students. They can do anything, they can get anything done, but it's also a really difficult time. And, for all the times I felt freaking flat on my face, and there were many, many of those, to be able to sit across the table from a new freshman, a new student at UW-Madison, and you can relate to this, being there when they perhaps get their first D on an exam, and to be able to say, look, let's put this into perspective. I got a 0.98 grade point average. That's a 0.98 grade point average first semester of my freshman year. And I was on, strict academic probation, double secret probation. I got myself off probation in a semester, but it really, I took a semester off. I needed to figure out what I wanted to do. But when I'm able to say to students, and then when a student perhaps is in academic difficulty and has to take a semester off or a year off, and to say to them, I took 4 semesters off from UW-Madison, spent 1 working at a canning company and realized I did want to get a college education, and then going to our local Madison College, Madison Area Technical College, and doing my general education requirements there is where I really discovered my love of learning. That was where I first discovered I could learn anything. I'd flunked a 5-credit chemistry class at UW-Madison. I got an A- at MATC when I took it. And all sorts of reasons for that to happen. But that's where I learned that I can learn anything, that I could learn algebra, I could learn chemistry, I could learn, and just the joy of learning. For me, that was my time. My graduate work was just that was my time. It might have been school and I might have had to write papers, but that intellectual stretching and learning to just love learning has shaped. I'm probably the most annoying mayor that a lot of my colleagues have ever had because I just ask a lot of questions. I need to know, being mayor, I need to know how street projects work. So I drive our engineers crazy. I ask a bazillion questions. I've learned about water velocity and infiltration and stormwater management and lead pipe reduction and what happens under the streets we all drive on and what we need to do to repair them. And anyway, I spun off in 80 different directions, but that curiosity too has always been really important to me. And I loved working in a place of higher education. I love that. For me, going to professional development opportunities was how I stayed fresh and how I learned new things and networked with colleagues. And being mayor now is like a whole new, learning a whole new host of things and patience. If you ever want to see how slowly things work in government, work in a rural government where we only meet once a month. Things don't tend to happen overnight. So anyway, yes, that calling has always been there. I think I was more focused on the aspects of my career along within that framework for many years. Now, back to the money issue, we're retired. I'm on a fixed income. That's going to be a real challenge for me because I just, I see I want, I deal with it, or we have someone in our lives who calls me mom. She's not related to me, but she's someone I met when she was trying to get to a battered women's shelter in Madison. This was probably in 2007, maybe 2008. And we just hit it off. And she's 47, I think, and lives up in Green Bay. She's on permanent disability and lives, tries to live on $800 a month. And we help her with, paying her cell phone bill and paying for her meds every month. And then, depending on what life throws her way, can we afford that now? I don't know. We're gonna figure it out. I'm realizing I can't belong to 80 different streaming services. So money for me has been both a motivating factor. When I first started at the Alumni Association, I worked for a man who had to be the cheapest person who ever arrived on this planet. And watching him open his briefcase and pull out a Ziploc baggie to gather the leftovers at receptions, or when we were working a 60-hour weekend and he would provide lunch of olive loaf and, head cheese and Wonder Bread, and just the machinations he went to never spend a penny of his money, it drove me nuts. It just drove me crazy. And life is too short to worry about that crap. Picking up the tab for lunch for someone who can't afford it, that's a joy. That is a gift I can give someone. So money has both been a blessing and a curse in my life, and I need to learn to manage it better. That's my current big goal on the horizon, is learning to live as a retired person. But it shaped a lot of my generosity of spirit and wallet, I guess, just watching that. And it really turned me off in so many ways. So that's why I'm focused on, it's not about my bank balance when I die. That's so unimportant. We have a roof over our head and plenty to eat, and we can still travel and live in a beautiful house. And that's all pretty awesome.
Yeah, it sounds like you're pretty clear on your priorities too. How do you anticipate you're going to learn how to live as a retired person? What do you think that's going to entail?
I think the question my husband is muttering probably hourly. I remember scoffing at a friend back in high school when she traveled with us, and she had a budget and she wrote everything down to the penny. And I was just like, are you freaking kidding me? I need to start being aware of what I spend. I have a lot of things on auto pay. Our devices make it way too easy to do app purchases or Amazon purchases. And I definitely need to become a lot more aware of how I spend money every month. And again, put the guardrails around that and what is really essential, what's really necessary. How many sweaters do I need to have in my closet? 20 is probably plenty. My mother was a shoe hoe. I'm not a shoe hoe, but I am probably a tech hoe. I love my technology. And you may remember when we were blessed to work together, Joe, that I have my big iPad, I have my little iPad, I have my Apple Watch, I have my iPhone. I love technology. So that's probably an area where I love to purchase gadgets and have not necessarily the latest technology, but certainly integrate technology into my life to make it easier. It also makes spending money that much easier. So yeah, a lot of it's just about reflection and tracking. And I think once I actually look at how much I spend every month, I'll probably be a little appalled because I know my husband has been for nearly 40 years. So yeah, we're just going to really have to start looking at what we're spending and saying, when I'm out of money, I'm out of money, not dip it into that pot that's over there that's not meant for Ann's indulgence, but for retirement and eating when we're 80.
Well, that sounds like it's easier said than done, especially given your reactions to people in your life who have been maybe
stingy,
overtly frugal.
Overtly frugal. That is a really so my father, both my parents were children of the Depression, but my father was a child of a depression on a farm in rural Wisconsin. He was an only child. And so Pop was really frugal. The worst advice my mother ever gave me was, if your father and I had waited until we had cash to do everything, we would never have traveled. Meanwhile, my folks traveled all over the world. And so I thought credit cards were just the greatest gift to humankind. I have learned to not do that. I have learned that I don't use credit cards. We're probably 99% cash based, except when we travel. So that has certainly improved. It's just the kind of daily, it will be much more difficult than it sounds, because I just spend money without thinking. I go to the grocery store, and when I need stuff, I don't check prices. I just get what we need. And that's my privilege. And that privilege at least needs to be reined in a wee bit. So it is easier said than done. It is not going to be an easy journey for me the next year or so. And I'm paying health insurance out of pocket, and that's $800 a month. And my mayor gig, amazingly enough, pays $800 a month. So, that at least pays for my insurance. But folks, let me tell you, running for local office is not, there are days when I think, I got paid six figures to do what I'm doing here for less than minimum wage. But that's okay. I don't want to work for anybody except the city of Lodi anymore.
Well, that seems pretty clear.
Yeah. So we'll see. Come check in with me in about 6 months. I'll either be divorced, dead, or have figured out how to live in a budget.
Those are the only options, huh?
Yeah, sort of. Or else I'll have picked up another job.
That wouldn't surprise me either. You're a very hardworking individual. I've always known that about you.
Thank you.
What is one change in habit that has had an exponential payoff?
So there are two that really made a huge difference for me. One was when I took a mindfulness-based stress reduction class. That was probably in 2010. And that was when I really removed my head from my backside and started being more mindful and paying attention to every day. I've always been really blessed with a pretty optimistic disposition. Jim talked about kind of being at that big picture vantage point. And I think I've always been blessed with, as crappy as things get, they're going to get better. They may get a little crappier in the short run, but in the long run, things generally turn out okay and work out. But that mindfulness class is where I really started living my life through a lens of gratitude. And that just changed everything. It literally changed everything in my life. The second thing was getting active. And I mentioned I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and I think a lot of that was never taking care of myself. I was at the Alumni Association and when I did all my coursework, and I was working with student and alumni relations, and I was probably working an average of 50, 60 hours a week and then going to grad school on top of that. And my health, my well-being was probably the last thing I ever thought about. There was literally no balance in my life. And that has consequences, and it has health consequences. And being diagnosed with fibromyalgia, at first I was like, okay, I've got a diagnosis now for all this pain I've been dealing with. So now just give me whatever medication I need to take and I'll go on my merry way and nothing will change. And that did not work. So I sort of let fibromyalgia shape my life. And then once I retired and I ran for the assembly and I had to do doors, I had to, go door to door in parts of 6 different counties. I had to be pretty physically active, and I lost some weight that fall. And then a friend of mine, who was my mom's best friend, got me into a class, a water treadmill class. So I love the water. I could spend days swimming. I just absolutely love it. And to get, you stood on this treadmill and they lowered you 4 feet into the water, and then you ran on a treadmill for a half an hour. And it was, interval training. And there were times when we were running 6 miles an hour, and I was in the best shape of my life, and I lost 50 pounds. And that changed everything too. Now, I used to lay awake worrying about the errands I would have to do or the logistics of getting anywhere because I was so limited physically. And now I'm flexible. And I should add, I also discovered edible THC, which, for those of you who are not familiar, that's cannabis, marijuana. And for me, that also changed my life because I was able to get off most of the pain medications that I was on. I still take Lyrica, which is a medication specifically for fibromyalgia, but I'm taking about half of what I was at the high point, and I don't take any pain medications. I'm off the antidepressant for pain management. And now I park at the furthest spot from anywhere I'm going. I take only my office is on the 2nd floor at work. And when you park in the back, it's, 2 flights up from the basement. And I never take the elevator. And it's, my Apple Watch is huge in that because it nudges me to stand up. And I have we had standing desks at the university too, but I stand most of the day at my desk, and just being able to pick stuff up off the floor without grunting or others, it just makes everything easier. So getting active was huge. And so when I can swim, I swim. I don't like to sweat. I'm not a big fan of exertion unless it's in the water. Hell, in the water, you don't even know if you're sweating. So get me in a pool, and in 45 minutes, I can burn 500 calories. And that's just amazing. When I go to Florida for vacation, I usually lose, 10 pounds or so while I'm down there and just get in really good shape. It's still a challenge to get that into my daily routine. We have an indoor pool here in Lodi up at our high school, but it's cold. So I like to go to the health club, to the warm pool, because I am that spoiled rotten. And driving there, is a 35-minute drive. And so to go work out, it's usually 3 hours to do everything and get home. So anyway, but
that's a lot of friction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I have a daily goal on my watch to burn at least 540 calories a day. And I try to stick with that and try to make that move goal every day. And that helps a lot. So yeah, bottom line, mindfulness, living in the present, taking time to meditate or just be. My mom and I always bought purses that were big enough to fit a book in. I have a tremendous fear of boredom. I don't like to sit and do nothing. During a football game, I'm reading my book constantly between plays. It just makes me crazy. But at the same time, to just set all this crap aside and sit here in my office and look out at the snow and my dog's down on the deck. And, there's just such joy in that too. And so that mindfulness it just changed everything. And then the activity. So those were 2 biggies I discovered late in life, but they've benefited my life every freaking day.
And I couldn't help but notice rationalizing the gadget, is a key part of that.
Oh, yes. My tech.
The gadget on your wrist.
When Apple Watches first came out, I thought, why the hell would I want my email annoying me on my wrist? You have got to be kidding. Then my cousin, Sharon Groves, who lives in DC, when I ran for the assembly, came and lived with us for 3 weeks and helped me campaign. in October of 2018. And Sharon had an Apple Watch, and I love Sharon and I love to emulate her in any way possible. So I thought, the gift I could give myself would be an Apple Watch because I thought it was kind of cool. The stuff this thing does, unbelievable. It does the little 3 notes of Brahms' lullaby at 10:45 every night to remind me it's time to get ready for bed. It tracks my sleep. It nudges me to be active. My boarding pass for flying is on here. I get all these news alerts when stuff happens locally and internationally. And and the most practical stuff, folks, if you don't have one of these, cooking, there is a timer on here that I use constantly. I'll put something in the oven, set the timer. It just is incredible. It does everything. And it is a great investment. So yes, my tech that way I like a lot.
All right. We know what you've said yes to. Yeah, you've said yes to tech. What have you said no to that has made a significant impact in your life?
Okay, so maybe I have one other life lesson to work on yet. No, I'm getting better at it. I am getting better at it. But I think those of us in these fields of the helping fields, the feeling that call to service, getting comfortable with knowing that there's always more to do. There are always people in need. There are always more tasks to do. I think they're saying no to big things like, do you want to be on this board of directors? Do you want to mentor this person? To me, those are kind of bigger things. But saying no also includes being able to shut work off when you leave and not have it haunt you, to be able to wake up in the middle of the night and go back to sleep without worrying and that interrupting. So I've gotten better at kind of tuning out the noise day to day. I still have a hard time with we have a charter school at our elementary school, and they've asked me to be on the board of directors. It's, a modest amount of time investment. So I'm struggling with do I accept that?
Sure. Well, since you have nothing else going on, you might as well, right? Since it's simply a modest amount of time.
I should have mentioned in my introduction that the love of my life, whom I met when I took that semester off school and worked at that canning company, he happened to be the superintendent at that canning company. And we met that summer or that fall and started dating the next summer, which we moved in together in the fall of 82. So we've been together for a very, very long time. But he is about 8.5, almost 9 years older than I am. And so he's already been retired for 8 years. And I think there are points in time when he's like, when are we really going to be retired? When am I not going to go to work? When am I going to join the party? And I did it for 1.5 years, which was awesome, or a year before I ran for mayor. But, we have figured we've got about a 10 to 15 year window to be able to travel. And so I need to get better at saying no to things so we can also honor the dreams that we've had. I tell people when they're hesitant about retiring, this is what we've worked our whole lives for, this time in our lives. Now, for me, being mayor is a joy, and most of the time it has its moments, but it's fulfilling my calling. But that balance for me is always difficult. I think, no shade to any of my predecessors as mayor, but I think I sat in that seat and I'm an administrator. That's what my career has been. So it's not just going to meetings and shaking hands. For me, it is administering, being the conductor of the orchestra for the day-to-day operations of the city of Lodi, as well as the future planning and all of that stuff. So it's not just going in a couple hours a week to hit some meetings and be accessible to people. I'm involved in a lot of stuff, and that's just the way I operate. So I've convinced my husband that I need one more term to get some of the things done, or at least get them started, the things that I wanted to get started. Then I'm going to have some hard choices to make, because by the time I finish my second term, if I'm lucky enough to get a second term, my hubby's going to be 70 years old. Time's a wasted. My parents they both retired when dad was 63 and mom was 59, I think. And they had about 10 years of really good travel and everything before some serious health issues set in. So I'm very cognizant of, this is the time we've worked our whole lives for, and let's have some fun and let's see the world that we wanted to do. So yeah, still working on that no thing.
No, it's all connected, Ann. It's all connected. Thank you.
God, I prattle. At least I remembered what you asked me.
What area in your life feels just about perfect?
My life feels pretty damn close to perfect. The pandemic just brought home how incredibly fortunate we are. We live in one of the most beautiful areas in the world. We are surrounded by protected wetlands and miles of hiking trails. The Ice Age Trail goes right through our community. There's an Ice Age Trail segment on our family farm. We're the gateway to Lake Wisconsin. There are tons of lakes or small lakes around here. This is just an incredibly beautiful place. And the pandemic brought us all more focused on where we live. And for us, it was sort of a realization that we have most of what we need right here in this little valley. We have massage therapy, we have many massage therapists. We have a great medical clinic and a dental clinic. How the meat we buy was raised on farms that you could go walk on. We know where our food comes from. We have abundance. I am so blessed to go to the pharmacy or the grocery store or wherever and see people I've known all my life. That continuity, that feeling, a really interesting thing happened. So I got elected as mayor and we were cleaning out some stuff. So the library here in Lodi was started by the Women's Club, and it's always been the Lodi Women's Club Public Library. And my grandmother and some of my great aunts were involved in the Women's Club and involved in the library. And so I had some stuff that I was looking through as I sat in the mayor chair, and I had this book from the Women's Club, and I opened it up, and right inside the cover was our local newspaper, the Lodi Enterprise, from 1919. There was an edition of it in there, and I opened it up, and there's a picture on the front page of my great aunt Elma, and she died in World War I. She was a nurse, and she got on a ship and went over to France, and along the way contracted the Spanish flu. And so she got to France, and she had, like cold symptoms, and she was isolated in a hospital and was improving, and then all of a sudden took a turn for the worse, and within an hour was gone. And so this Lodi Enterprise from 1919 had a picture of my great aunt, and they reprinted the letter that was sent to my great grandparents about her death. And there was this moment of realization of, holy shit, this happened 101 years ago, that my relatives here in this very place were dealing with the Spanish flu. I'm going to get verklempt talking about this. And just the knowledge of what they struggled with and what we're dealing with and following in their footsteps. My great uncle and my grandfather were both in the legislature here in Wisconsin. And it just brought home how just fortunate we are to be right here. I made some not great decisions along the way. I made some great decisions along the way. One of them was falling in, I guess that wasn't really a decision, but falling in love with the man that I am so blessed to have next to me every day. What more could we need? Or we don't need anything. So when you say what parts of my life feel just about perfect, I would say the vast majority of my life feels, it would be incredibly selfish and ungrateful to think that we need any more than what we have. And it ain't all flowers and roses. And when I'm, trying to get stuff done in the city, or when I'm dealing with the divisions in our communities, it feels not great, but that's all temporary. That's all just temporary. We're temporary. So I would say my life feels pretty damn good.
I love that answer. It's a good one. Who is someone you admire, and what do you admire about them?
Oh my goodness. So one of the things I hate when you create an account somewhere is they ask you, what was your favorite movie, or what was your favorite? I don't have favorites. Many, many years ago, I learned a difficult lesson, and that was I had someone sort of on a pedestal. And when I went to work for this individual and got an up close view, I realized, we are all imperfect people. And there are parts of I think everybody in my life, there's something that I admire about them. But I also know that we are all works in progress and we all have things that we need to be working on. So what I admire is people who have the courage to live their values. What I admire is people who stand up and do what's right, even when it means losing their job or being unpopular or being the target of whatever. What I have no patience for are people who get into positions of power and make decisions based on what's going to help them retain that power. And for me right now, the divisions in our country are horrific. And when I see, and both the fact that we are a two-party system has messed up things. So life is not black or white. Life is not red or blue. Life is full of nuances. And we have created a system where, and during this pandemic, it's been so stark to see that we've been able to see elected leaders making decisions not about what's in the best interest of people or public health or our future or lifting people up, but not just what's going to look good or keep them in power, but it's crossed these lines that I think 30 years ago, none of us would have ever thought would get crossed. Meaning people get elected and think it's okay to lie and manipulate people to stay there. And that to me is just the worst of the worst. When you think it's okay to just outright lie to people, and I'll own this election misinformation. I was an election inspector here in Lodi. The clerk reports to me. I watch our elections. To think that there is some vast conspiracy that these wonderful patriotic people are involved in who come and spend a day checking you in, handing you a ballot. They read the book of directions. They follow everything to the nth degree. They're so meticulous. To them, to that generation, that is the epitome of upholding our democracy, is making sure we have free and fair elections. And so the people I admire are the ones who go against. So people will have a crap. Is it Mary Cheney? Liz Cheney, a Republican from Idaho, Utah. I'm blanking. But anyway, she's a Republican, but she has stood up and said what we're doing, what this party is doing is wrong. And she's been absolutely vilified for it. But by God, she's standing up for the truth. She is investigating January 6th. Because we damn near lost our democracy that day. And people are willing to say anything to not own what happened that day. Now, politically and on social issues, Liz and I have next to nothing in common when it comes to what our view of the world is and what we think is important and how we should get there. But she loves this democracy and she has dedicated her life to it. And she has stood up and really taken a stance that is incredibly unpopular by her entire party. And Adam Kinzinger out of Illinois, same thing. They're people I admire because they're risking everything to do what's right. I just want to see politicians do what's right. And we are at a point where we need to elect people who are willing to say, I may only be here a term or two, but in that term or two, I'm going to leave this democracy healthier than when I got here. Now, if you can't tell, I'm a pretty progressive person, but right now my efforts are focused on preserving our democracy. My efforts are, I'm working with an organization called Represent Us, and their website is represent.us, and they are, all of us working in that with that organization are on every end of the political spectrum, but we're focused on things like nonpartisan redistricting. In the state of Wisconsin, we have had a legislature for 10 years who has been able to completely ignore the will of the people because they know they're going to get reelected. They have gerrymandered the maps. So there is no question that they're going to get elected. So I've met with them individually. They will agree with everything I say, and I walk out the door and they vote the party line. It's just crap. So now we've had this for 10 years. If you look on many issues, Wisconsin is the state that's in gray while everybody else is in whatever color because we ain't doing shit about it. And So countless people across the state have been working on fair maps. I've been part of the Columbia County Fair Maps group for a year and a half now. So suddenly the legislature did what we thought they would do, and they made new maps based on these awful current maps. And now our Supreme Court has endorsed that. So we're facing being stuck with this for another 10 years. Now, over 70% of the citizens of this state who were able to vote on a referendum about fair maps supported nonpartisan redistricting. The gentleman I ran against in 2018 said that he supported nonpartisan redistricting. Guess what? Here we are. And we may be stuck with this bullshit for another 10 years. Mara Eliason from NPR said it very well. We may soon be a country that is minority run because of all of the machinations that they have put in place, and people don't see it and they don't look hard. And so I think people who just are focused on doing what is the right thing to do, that is hard. That it's just hard to do the damn right thing at times. It can be very easy, picking up litter or whatever. There are easy decisions, but when you're risking everything to do what's right and to stand up for what's right, those are the people that Desmond Tutu, we just lost him. That man spoke truth to power. He risked everything. And he did it in a joyful, happy, celebratory way. And he's someone I greatly, greatly admired. And I'm sad that we've lost him. My parents, I wish I'd known my grandfather. He died when I was a year old, but he was in the legislature. He and his brother were elected on the progressive ticket in 1930 something. I have their poster up here in my office, vote progressive. And they were just so focused on doing the right thing. My great uncle Harold was one of the authors of the first unemployment compensation law in the country, was here in Wisconsin. And that was also used. There's a Groves law that is a footnote in the Social Security that was put in place. Doing the right thing is not always easy, and it takes courage, and it takes a strong moral compass. And I just see so many people up close and personal and at a distance doing stuff for all the wrong reasons, and it's really disheartening. So anyway, I admire people who have the courage to just live their values and do what's right, and the consequences be damned.
Yeah, well, that's very evident. And I've known that, again, about you for some time as well.
Thank you.
That you admire that. What do you imagine some people admire about you? Is it lack of passion, perhaps?
Oh, yes. My lack of caring about anything. I don't think of myself in that. When I talk about legacy, it's more of the big picture legacy. I don't know what people, I mentioned that I hope people think of my laugh, how subtle my laugh is. I hope people think of the joy that I found in life and that I found in them after I'm gone. I've had several conversations recently about many of us have embarrassing moments. And if you're by yourself and no one's around, a lot of people don't speak of them. I just think they're wonderful to share with everyone. So my moments of greatest failure or embarrassment are always great fodder for laughs. I felt that getting through life with a good sense of humor makes everything a whole lot better. And I've had many laughing through tears moments in funeral homes. Kind of a side gig that I didn't mention earlier is I also got ordained as a online minister in 2010. I'm the Honorable Reverend Dr. Ann Groves Lloyd, because I think I should just collect titles along the way. But anyway, that I have been blessed to officiate probably 25 or 30 weddings. But I've also officiated some funerals, memorial services, and celebration of life. And a friend of mine came up, one of my high school classmates, came up here. We'd just gotten back from Alaska in early November, and he lives in Canada now, but he was home and seeing his mom, and he said, "Can I come over and talk to you?" So we sat outside and caught up, and then he said the reason he was here was his mom is kind of getting her life in order. She's in her mid to late 80s, and she wanted this friend of mine to ask me if I would be willing to officiate her funeral. You could have knocked me over with a feather. I'm not that close to his mom. Of course, I've known her most of my life. I don't know why she asked me, but I'm incredibly honored that she asked me to do that. So I don't think a lot about how people view me. I just try to be authentically myself. I'm the worst liar on the planet. I watch TV shows and think, wow, there is no way. My husband knows the minute I am not telling the truth. It shows on my face. It shows in my posture. It's just impossible for me to do it. Life may have been more interesting if I had been better at it. So I hope people just think highly of me with what I've done for my community and our ability to move through life with a little bit of grace, humility, a lot of humility, and a good sense of humor.
Well, I'm sure people think of you when they're thinking compassion, when they're thinking heart, levity, to be sure, and definitely that laugh. I know our worlds intersected, but briefly for a few years. But
it was wonderful.
Yeah, it absolutely was. It absolutely was. It has been. And what else, if anything, would you like to share with listeners? I really appreciate all your candor and your responses here.
Oh, it's been a great pleasure. I think one of the things I did early on as well was I went to a conference or a workshop about writing your values legacy. And my cousin Edna Groves, who now lives in Boise, she actually helped my dad write his memoirs, and she had a master's in counseling. But she taught this workshop where on Friday night, you spent a couple hours reflecting on what values were kind of instilled in you growing up and who influenced you and who helped you mold those values. And then you spent some time writing about what your current values were as this whole core values and authenticity sort of thing. And then you wrote a values legacy to someone in your life. And thinking about that legacy and now following in the footsteps of some of my ancestors who ran for office, and many of them were in a life of service and very reflective. Looking at that legacy and just taking time to think about, to me, a lot of it is, I want to write my own obituary, and thinking about that legacy and just being intentional about what we're leaving behind in this world. When my mom passed, everybody in my family gets cremated. And so we have a cemetery plot up at the cemetery here in Lodi. And when you drive in the main gate, there's a little tiny hill. And as you crest that hill, our family is there, all of our ancestors back to my great-great-great-grandparents, I think. So when mom died, dad got like this 3-foot tall, and he put him and mom on the front of it. And then my eldest brother on the back side, my other brother on the other side. And then as you drive in, what you see is my husband and my names and my stepson's names. And I think that was a little startling the first time I pulled into a cemetery and saw my name on a marker. And it was sort of like, wow, what the hell? But it's also been galvanized that notion of, sometime in the not that distant future, that's going to be what is here to mark that I was here in this valley. Now that's a physical representation of what I've left here, but I know, I will live on in the people that I've interacted with, and hopefully the Groves name will be thought of with, Ann Groves Lloyd, thought of with kindness and knowing that legacy and taking that time to really think about who you are and what is important to you and what motivates you as you sort of flow through this time on earth. I just hope everybody takes that time. All those years I sort of laughed at the exercise nerds. What they say, there is no fast trick to losing weight. There are no shortcuts. Balance takes discipline and having to say no to things that I might want to do, but knowing I would be better off climbing into bed and getting a good 8-hour night's sleep. The lessons I've learned in the last 10 years, there are many of them that I wish I'd picked up on 20, 30 years ago. But there's a line in a song, I think it's something like wisdom would be wasted on youth, or your youth would be much less fun if wisdom were involved in it. So, it's nice to be at this point in my life and not feel like I have a whole lot of regrets. That's a good thing. And the regrets that I do, there's this, at this age, I know things happen. I feel things happen for a reason. And when a door was shut somewhere, or when we had to make difficult decisions, it might be really, really shitty for a short amount of time, but it always gets better. It always gets better. So if I can say anything to anyone who might listen to this, just know that you are loved and that your life has great meaning and tremendous value. And as difficult and dark as things may be, there is always, always light somewhere. Just hang on and survive and get through it. And, you will find joy again, and you will find happiness again. And people care.
Very nicely said. Thank you. Thank you it's always a treat to chat with you. So thank you for your thoughts and plenty of things to reflect on. Goodness, there's a lot here. So thank you.
It has been a joy, Joe. I'm so proud of what you're doing and who you are. It's been great to see you go after being an intentional life coach and settling into what your calling is. Listening to your podcast was really fun, and I subscribed, so I'm going to keep up with you that way. But
wonderful.
And so good. Those years that we worked in academic advising, and the last 5 years leading up to my retirement were some of my happiest on campus. We worked with just some amazing people who all of us felt very called to what we were doing, but we worked damn hard, but had a hell of a good time doing it. And that has stayed with me. That's what I want for the rest of my life.
Awesome.
Let's work hard, but have a really good time doing it.
Yes, very well said. All right, Ann, I will leave you to your mayoral duties for the rest of the day. Thank you so much again.
Collecting signatures. Good to see you. Give my best to Joey and your wonderful wife. And let's stay in touch, my friend.
Absolutely, 100%.
All right. Take care.
This has been Intentionally Ever After, hosted by intentional lifestyle coach Joe Bukartek. If you would like to have your own intentional conversation with Joe on or off the air, visit intentionallyeverafter.com. Thanks for listening.